Other speaker, David. So, Mikel, could you play the recording, please?
Temitope from Lagos, Nigeria. Revolutionary greetings, brothers and sisters. This is Ifagunwa Temitope from Lagos, Nigeria. Let me start off my small talk. I intend for it to be a small talk by thanking the organizers of today's historic and symbolic conference, the RMT and also the GAC, for the invite I got, and also for putting together the 11th annual conference of reparations. Let me say that the conference or the event is one event on the right path. Although I'm not with you all physically, but I do believe I'm with you all in spirit. Well, I'm not with you all physically because the United Kleptomaniac Home Office intentionally delayed my visa application process. It is so unfortunate to say that for the past 1 month and some weeks now, I've been on the application process, but I haven't gotten anything tangible from the United Kleptomaniac Home Office. And that, to me, I think is not accidental or is not unconnected to some things. I do believe it is connected to various of things which I do not think it would be right to go into right now in my small talk. But I think also that the discussion on the delay I experienced in respect to my visa application process is yet again a reflection, or is an illumination, or it tells us as Africans, as Pan-Africanist revolutionaries, it tells us the need, the essentiality for us to intensify our struggle in demanding for the right of getting the unpaid labor of our ancestors. The over 500 years unpaid labor of our ancestors. It speaks about the need for us to intensify the struggle in getting the question of our reparation to the table. Because you and I know that when the Europeans came down to Africa to come steal and also exploit our resources, our human and our natural resources, they didn't come with any passports. They didn't need any visa before coming down to this continent to steal our resources for several centuries. But here we are in 2017, you and I, we are living at a time where we have to work our fingers to the bones to get visa to go to those countries. Where in actual fact, the wealth that those countries today are actually stolen wealth from Africa. It is not news anymore that the entirety of most museums in Europe are done with stolen African artifacts. In 1897, for instance, when Benin Kingdom was invaded by the British, the totality of the artifacts they could find were carted away. And when you look at most museums in the United Kleptomaniac, where you are today, you would see that the entirety of most of these museums are done with stolen African artifacts, most of which are Benin artifacts. I'm pointing this out because it is essential for us to understand or to internalize into ourselves that the question of reparation is not a given. The question of reparation is not just something we have to play with or we have to joke with. It is a must. It is essential. It is something that we need to stamp our foot on the ground that they must really face up to. It is not something that we have to beg for. It is something we have to struggle for, and it is something we have to fight for. And that's why I'm appreciative of the theme of today's conference. I mean, unfortunately, I'm not with you all, because I would have loved to discuss this, have a down to the heart discussion with you all on this question. But not doing that right now, I mean, not being entitled to do that right now still implies that there's a way in which I could articulate, at least point out all of the things I would have wanted to say, had it been with you all today. I would have wanted to point out, in addressing the question of reparation, that, like I pointed out, the question of finance, we're getting back those things, the wealth that was stolen from us for 500 years, we're getting it back today, implies that there must be some financial commitment on the side of those that have stolen our wealth, and unfortunately still stealing our wealth, still exploiting our wealth. There must be some form of financial commitment. But it is important to state that the question of reparation is not just the question of getting financial commitments from these elements. The question of reparation has a lot, I do believe, with we carrying out one of the most difficult jobs on the planet Earth right now, which is the question of self-repairs. We're trying to repair the entirety of things that has to do with us. So you would see that the question of reparation, I think it has much to do with we're trying to make amendments personally. We're trying to repair our minds as Africans. You and I understand the fact that the chunk of our people today, they're living under the condition of traumatic slave syndrome. We really do not call it post-traumatic slave syndrome because there's nothing post about our state. You and I understand the fact that many of us were still in chains. And we stay in chains, but not physically, but mentally. So I think the question of reparation, as much as it is, the financial commitment is as much as it is important, I think the work of our reparation still lies with us in trying to carry out the necessary self-repairs, carrying out the repairs of our stolen systems, in carrying out the repairs of our stolen cultural system, stolen political system, stolen economic system, stolen social system, stolen spiritual system, all forms of systems that the white oppressors, the white exploiters destroyed when they came down to our continent. I think the need for us to rebuild all of those systems implies that the question of reparation has a lot to do with self-repair. But even despite the fact that it has a lot to do with self-repair, I still do believe that for us to be able to rebuild all of these institutions, for us to be able to rebuild all of these institutions, we must make it clear to those that enjoyed the stolen wealth of our ancestors. We must make it clear to them that they must come up with financial commitment. They must come up with financial commitment for us to be able to rebuild all of those institutions and all of those systems. It is not going to be a day job for us to rebuild all of the necessary institutions that we need today as African people. It is not going to be a day job to rebuild all of the systems that we need today as Africans. So they must come up with financial commitments because the entirety of their wealth today are actually a product of the stolen wealth from this continent. So it is not a given that we demand for financial commitment from these people. But like I pointed out also, the question of self-repair is as important as the question of demanding for financial commitment from this element. Let me quickly just address the theme of today's conference, which is on the role of the trade unionist in our demand or in our struggle, our fight for reparation. I think the role of black trade union members cannot be overemphasized. It cannot be underestimated at the same time. Because you and I know that union members, labor, workers are the creators of wealth. No matter how much you talk about it, no trade union members, no wealth in whatever country, whatever climate, in whatever continent, it doesn't really matter. Historically, we all know that union members are creators of wealth. As such, the role that black trade unionists have to pay in we getting back our dues, in we getting back the over 500 years of paid labor of our ancestors cannot be underestimated. And that's why I would have loved to be with you physically to discuss many of these things, but I think it is important for us to understand that the role of the trade unionist, black trade unionist, cannot be underestimated because they have direct access to many of these industries that seems to be gallivanting around today as a result of the stolen wealth from Africa. So it will not be out of place if our unionists today form organizations or join in with other organizations that are demanding for reparation by forming groups, core groups that can come up with plans on having consistent protest, consistent picketing, and also consistent way of propagating the need for those companies, for those factories that have made chunk of wealth from the stolen wealth of Africa today, by having all of this picketing, all of these protests for them, by telling them, by propagating the need for them to come up with some financial commitment towards our need for reparation. So I think that the role of the trade unionists, black trade unionists, cannot be underestimated. We must form core groups. We must form core organizations that will have direct access to all of these industries, to all of these factories. USC, for instance, still strives right on this continent, whereas in actual fact, USC historically was a slave trading organization, was a slave trading company. So you begin to see that all of these companies that we celebrate today are actually once slave-owning companies. So you and I must understand all of these things. We used to have the Royal Niger Company, and several of them. They were all formerly slave-owning companies. They made their wealth from the dealings in our ancestors. They commodified our ancestors, and many of them made their wealth from that. So I really think that the role of trade unionists, black trade unionists, cannot be underestimated. So they must come up with works. We must understand our role by coming up with works, formidable works, to face these companies that have profited from the enslavement of our ancestors. Yeah. We must, the black unionists must propagate the need for us to struggle within the right context of getting back all of the undue, all of our dues, all of the unpaid labor of our ancestors. But in doing this, the black trade unionists must have that clarity also. Like I pointed out earlier on, the role of the trade unionists cannot be underestimated. But in doing this, we must come up with the necessary clarity that our struggle is a means and not an end in itself. It's not an end in itself in the sense that once we've gotten all of those things, all of our unpaid labor, the question of what we're going to do with it shouldn't come thereafter. At this particular point in time, we should also be articulating what will be done with all of those resources, with all of those wealth when we eventually get them back. But like I pointed out earlier on, it will be a waste of time if we're going to get all of those things if we do not carry out self-repairs on ourselves. The greatest part of our system that needs reparation is our mind. And we must come up with that. But in doing that also, like I pointed out earlier on, the need for demand for financial commitment from those that have stolen the wealth of our people cannot be underestimated. So I think the black trade unionists have the historic role to play by articulating and by rallying amongst fellow workers, black workers, and also other groups of people who are interested in this cause, but importantly, and particularly organizing, rallying amongst black brothers and sisters for them to form core groups, for them to form core organizations in order for them to have that formidable power, that formidable number to face companies, to face organizations that enjoyed the stolen wealth of Africa, that enjoyed the stolen wealth of our ancestors. Brothers and sisters, I would have wanted this discussion to last longer than this, but unfortunately I can't because it's just a recorded conversation. Usually I don't sound the way I would have wanted to on records, but I do believe that this won't be the last time we'll be speaking to one another. Why this is the first, this won't be the last. And I do look forward. I do look forward your contact. I do look forward works with one another, subsequently. So let me thank the organizers once again for the opportunity. And I do believe that today's discussion will be lucrative. Today's discussion will be meaningful. Today's discussion will be relevant in articulating our struggles, in articulating our fight for our unpaid labor. Thank you.
Okay. This is the caliber of the young man, in that I asked him yesterday to do this, and he has done it and provided it for us. We will not allow them to prevent us from talking to each other. And whenever they think that they are playing their games of agreeing the visa after the conference, perhaps, we will still bring him here to speak to us, and we can speak and address that. So without much further